Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio on Saga 960. So one of my bucket list things to do, one of the dreams I've always had, is to go and do this trek, this journey, this pilgrimage that goes from France through northern Spain to I believe, the Atlantic Ocean. And someone who I've interviewed before, someone who I admire, Kathleen Black, has just completed this Camino de Santiago pilgrimage from France through northern Spain. And so I wanted to check in with her and find out about how it went. Kathleen Black, by the way, runs Kathleen Black coaching consulting company. She coaches real estate brokers and agents on setting up teams. And she also has recently become engaged. So congratulations, Kathleen.
I haven't become engaged, but thank you. But I have gotten in a relationship after a long time not being in one. So that's a fair assumption.
Oh, I jumped. I apologize. I thought you were engaged, but you announced publicly that you're in a relationship. So congratulations.
Yes, which, hey, in this day and age is still something, but thank you. And yeah, I just did come back from that trek. So it was fantastic.
So tell me, number one, what the trek is, and number two, what motivated you to do it?
Number one, well, the Camino is a pilgrimage that people have done for actually a couple thousands of years, at least the one that's acknowledged by, the church, and people believe that they were actually doing it even long before that through the medieval towns. And people can leave all over Europe. So there's, the famous Camino routes, like there's one which is the Primitivo, which is 10 days, and you're up in the really, really steep kind of woods overlooking the northern coast. There's one that's on the coast through beaches, but the main one, when you see the movies and when you read books about it, is the French way, which is the way of St. James, and that's just over or under, depending on your detours and all that fun stuff, 800 kilometers, where you start at St. Jean Pied de Port, which is just on the French side. It's in France, just before the Pyrenees. And then you go across into Spain on your first hiking day, and you go all the way across, all the way to either Santiago de Compostela or to Finisterre, which they used to believe was the end of the world, which is really cool. And they have a lighthouse where people will burn something. And there's all sorts of traditions on the way, but people believe you're kind of called to do it. Some people just feel called to do it. And I met so many people who have wanted to do it, 10 years, 15 years, people had just retired, have dreamt of doing it for 20 years. So some people, it's a spiritual journey. Some people it's religious. Others, it's just to check out and, kind of be out and free in nature for a little over a month, basically.
And what motivated you to do it? Was it a spiritual journey, or was it checking out?
It was definitely, I would say, for me, a spiritual journey. I felt called to do it for a long time. 10 years ago, or even more than that, when I bought my first cottage, there was a book there about the pilgrimage. And then I started to notice movies, and then I saw their books, and then I saw ads, and it was just everywhere. And then people would tell me about doing the pilgrimage. I just always wanted to do it, but I think it is designed to kind of get you, back to yourself and back aligned with the world. Like there's a lot of metaphor of doing the Camino, which is the way, and also following your own way in life, right? And not just kind of selling out. Like I think on the Camino, you go through cities and you start to see the world a little bit differently, and the material side a little bit differently. And there's something to be out all day, even if you're struggling and just in nature. And this year, obviously, it wasn't as busy. So I think it was the perfect year for me to do it, ironically, because you're walking several days just on your own. And there's something really special about that to me. So yeah, I think I definitely was looking for some time and some reflection. And
now the spiritual part of it, I understand, is one of Jesus's disciples or apostles actually did this. And supposedly every day you can visit a church or you do visit a church. Tell us a little bit about that history of it, if you could.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like basically Santiago, later on, they said they found his bones 600 years later up kind of looking out over Santiago de Compostela. And the meaning of the city is the city of the stars. And the people were always gravitating to go there even before they built the cathedral, because it was this beautiful kind of higher point before you come into the city where the stars are just so clear and beautiful. And they believed it was, calling people there. But they also did move. They have a tomb of the disciple rite in Santiago de Compostela. So people do it to honor that ancient pilgrimage for sure. You can go into multiple churches every day usually. With COVID this year, it was very different. 2 years ago, I did about 138 kilometers of the Camino, just the end. And it was, it's usually the busier part, because if you ever want to be an official pilgrim, you only actually have to do, I think it's 111 kilometers, the last portion, and you'll still get what's called the Compostela from the church, either for distance or for, spiritual reasons. So it's usually a busy part. But doing it 2 years ago, people, the priests will come out, they'll stamp your credentials because you have a passport as a pilgrim. You'll stay in, convents or other places that are kind of religious run. This year was interesting because, either you were in a city where it's only the convent open, which the church is running, it's the only place you can stay, or they're all closed. So it was really different experience. But I mean, the bigger cities like Lyon and Burgos that have the beautiful, massive cathedrals, I mean, they're open, but you're buying a ticket. Like it's a little bit more like a museum feel for them. But yeah, a lot of people are doing it for religious reasons, going, they believe once in their life they want to have that, I guess, tribute. I don't know the right word that they use. Everyone uses a different word for it.
And are you a hiker for a long time?
I love to go. I kind of, I don't really love the idea of, I like relaxing holiday, but I like to go, like a couple of years ago, we went to Amalfi just to do the Path of the Gods. And then I've done it like 4 times now, or hiked around Cinque Terre. So yeah, I love to be out and have the challenge and hike. I didn't know about 800 kilometers because when I did the first time, I did 138 or 134 kilometers, but the last 8 kilometers, my knee gave out. So it was excruciatingly painful, and I was so close to the end, and I had to actually stay in Gonzo, where there's a lake that in ancient times the pilgrims would bathe there because there would be a lot of disease. They would, have a lot of smell, right? So they would cleanse themselves, and that lake is actually putrid now, which is a really interesting, change considering what it used to be. But I had to stay there and go down the 5 kilometers. So this time I was a little bit intimidated about my knee, so I felt I had to be really careful. But yeah, I love to go out and hike and have a challenge for sure.
800 kilometers, how long did it take you?
Well, I planned for it to take me 32 to 36 days. That I had 2 itineraries to go by, but I ended up to finish it technically in 26 and a half days. Like the last day I did a half day. So yeah, I did a little bit faster than I anticipated. I think they say wherever you go, there you are, right? So yeah, there were many like 40 kilometer days. And the first day I took a detour, and it was almost 50 kilometers going up over the Pyrenees. So it was an interesting start, we could say.
We're chatting tonight with Kathleen Black. She is a coach in the real estate business. She coaches real estate agents, brokers on creating teams. But tonight we're talking about her trek across France and northern Spain, the Camino el Santiago, a very famous religious, spiritual, get out there and do it pilgrimage. We're going to take a break and come back with Kathleen in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Kathleen Black of Kathleen Black Coaching Consulting, and her trek, her pilgrimage across France and northern Spain called the Camino de Santiago. Kathleen, tell us a little bit about your trek.
Yeah, so I have, for those watching the visual, I have a picture up showing kind of the start, the first day, because I think the first day, does what all great adventures do, and it intimidates us a little bit. And I remember arriving in the Pyrenees in the town and, going to my, you can call it a hostel, or they call it alberge or albergue, depending on how you say it. It's basically where you sleep if you're a pilgrim. So pilgrims have what's called a credential, and the credential is like a little passport that you buy, and everywhere you stay you get a stamp. And so that first day, everybody's kind of excited, and you're getting used to all your gear and the bunks, and this year not as crowded, but still other pilgrims being there. And I remember, and is
there like an opening gate to the pilgrimage, or a church that you first start at, or like a passport office, or what?
Yes, you arrive and you go to the pilgrim's office, which is the main one in St. Jean Pet Support, and you have to check in and give your real passport and say where you're going to and, you know, how far you're going to go the next day. And it was kind of funny because the person checking me in goes, wait, you're going to go all the way to, and I say it wrong because it's not Ronsonvale, but I can't remember the right way to say it. And I said it the wrong way so many times that it's stuck in my head. But it's basically about 32 to 34 kilometers. And I remember him saying, you're going to go the whole way the first day? I said, yes, I'm going to go the whole way the first day. And he didn't look that confident. But the whole town is like a gateway to the Camino. Like that's basically what it's there for. This year, they've attracted a lot of French tourists. So the town was hopping. It was still very, very busy actually, whereas Spain didn't have that same effect. But there's two ways you can go. You get to basically a fork in the road, you go around an ancient like stone house, and you either go straight and you go the easier, lower way to Ronsonvale, the first place, or you go what's called Napoleon's Way, which is you go right up over the crest of the mountains and through and cross over into Spain, across the Pyrenees. So some people are very intimidated because you're not into walking yet. And, you know, a lot of the guidebooks are 20, 22 kilometers the first day. So, you know, I'm all ready to go, 6 a.m. I'm out the door, I'm eating breakfast, it's dark, I'm going. And, you know, my albergue owner had given me some extra instructions. So I'm thinking, okay, perfect. And just ironically, I had downloaded an app that had GPS. You didn't have to have data because I didn't want to be connected to my phone. And at some point I'm passing farms and cheese factory. I was like, something doesn't quite seem right. And this is the day I'm already nervous about. So I wanted to be ahead. And I look on the app and I'm way off. Like I'm past the side of the mountain that I'm supposed to be on top of. And I'm in the valley below. And I had to make a decision because if you want to do the Camino, there's a lot of people who are really Puritans about it, and you believe like you walk every single step. People hitchhike all the time in France and Spain, but at home, like in Canada, it's not seen as safe. So I kind of had to make a decision, like you either walk back, and I'd already been walking for a couple of hours, or you hitchhike, or you start tomorrow, or you look at the GPS. So I looked at it and I found this little path, at least the GPS showed me, to go up the side of the mountain, which was more steep, but then I could meet up with Napoleon's Way and still do the majority of it. I would have just missed kind of them going on the ascent up the mountain. So that's what I did, which actually made my first day about 48 kilometers long and exhausting because it was very, very steep going up the side of the mountain. But I did make it, and the picture, it's just breathtaking. Like I think I have a little video.
And so you're on your own. You're not with anybody. You don't have a tour guide.
No tour guide. No, I did it on my own. I did not subscribe to a tour or have a guide. I was my own guide. And I kind of joked at the end of day one, and I said, it's a great metaphor, though, if you believe that life gives you clues and life kind of guides you, because I was so nervous about doing this hike, and it was supposed to be 32 kilometers. And at the end of the day, life signed me up for a bigger hike, and I did okay. You know, like I think I was tired the first week because of it, but I was okay. I got through it. And there's
are there other people on the path?
Yeah, usually it's interesting because people who have done the full Camino before, seeing my pictures, some of them felt it was really eerie because they said they're used to it being very busy and lots of pilgrims, and you know, you have to leave really early in the morning, which I did anyway, for it to be more quiet. But this was a different year. You know, there were people from Europe, but I really felt like certain people were called to be there this year. So it was extremely quiet. It's rest stops. I might see a couple of pilgrims, but it was also beautiful because I knew the pilgrims by face, right? Like I talked to the people, and, you know, I'd meet up with people 3 days later because they fell behind a little bit or I went forward. And that was a really special thing. But I think I trusted I could navigate myself through it, and I wanted the challenge. And there's beautiful tributes. Like there's a spot here, which is at the top of the Pyrenees. And, you know, if you're religious or spiritual or not, like you can't help but feel really connected. You know, you're on the top of these massive mountains with these breathtaking views, and you've got, like this, like a Virgin Mary there. And I took many, many moments just to be silent by myself. And I think on a typical year, I probably couldn't have done that, you know, just to kind of reflect without other people around on the top of a mountain is a pretty cool thing to be doing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And where do you end up at the end of the first day?
I wish I could say it properly, because I called it Ronsonville the whole time, I think thinking of Toronto, the street, and then found out that is not. But you cross the border. So I actually crossed the border from France into Spain in the mountains. And just by fluke, there were two other women, both hiking on their own, who right around that time just happened to be there. I was on my own most of the whole day. So we actually took pictures of each other. And I don't know, because I've got so many pictures here, crossing over the border. Going into Spain. So it's really cool, because people are like, are you going to be able to cross through? But nobody's there. You're in the mountains. You just walk past it. Right. So yeah. And then going into that town too, they had told me directions to go one way instead of another. And again, I misunderstood and went the steep way that they said not to go, because you could slip and fall and die. But yet here I am. So it was an interesting first day.
So according to the map that I'm looking at, Roncesvalles is spelt the exact same way as the street Roncesvalles in Toronto.
This is what I tried to explain to people there, who thought it was hilarious that I was pronouncing it like that. And they said, we didn't want to correct you because we thought it was so cute, but we had no idea what you were saying.
So you show up in Roncesvalles or whatever it's called, or however it's pronounced, late afternoon?
That day, no, because I was out for 48 kilometers is a long day, right? So if I remember correctly, I think I arrived somewhere around 6:30. I was out it might have been a bit earlier than that. I think I had 10 and a half hours of hiking, and I left around 6 or 6:30. So
that's
it must
a lot
have been
for
more
your first
4,
day.
4:30. Yeah, it was more than I planned around. But
and then how do you find a place to sleep? Is that pre-organized?
It's not pre-organized, but in that case, the municipal albergue was open. So when you're a pilgrim, you can go to the municipal albergues, because people believe the pilgrims, it's like a sacred passage. And there are towns that literally they are created and their values are around supporting the pilgrims, because they believe that they're doing something that is sacred and very important, and they want to keep it alive. So there's a belief, to help pilgrims and not, overly commercialize it. Now, that being said, there are private albergues where you pay 20 euros a night, but the municipal ones usually are anywhere from 5 euros a night to maybe 7 max. With COVID, some of them were a few dollars more. But that's a huge facility, and thank goodness it was open, because it's the main one. So I stayed and had a bunk there, and kind of long bunk rooms with multiple bunk beds.
And washroom and shower facilities, and then where do you eat?
Yeah, it depends. Most of the time in the towns you can get what they call pilgrim's menu. So it's a fixed price, and they give you either a soup or a salad, some type of protein, fish or beef usually, with fries. And then they give you a yogurt for dessert, and most of them give you wine too. So you go there, and some of them, typically part of what was missing this year is that often if you go to albergues with kitchens, the Camino is known for the Camino meal, that people either cook together or that the albergue will cook and you eat. And so you meet people from all over the world, right? But this year I only was able to do a couple of communal meals. Other than that, we went and got pilgrim's meal at, whatever restaurant was open. Or to be honest, there were several days where I took a shower and you change every night. I wore the same outfit every night after my shower for 26 days because you don't get a lot of extra clothes. But I changed and I got in my bunk and I intended to go out, but there were some really long days where I just kind of took some bread out of my bag and ate it and just went to sleep. And I was up again before light out, right, to hike. So, there are a few days like that. And
I understand in most of these towns, if not all the towns, there's a church. Did you go visit the church in Roncesvalles?
In Roncesvalles, it was not. There was a small chapel open, the main church. There was remnants, and there's actually a huge history there, obviously, because it's one of the first famous stops. So you can go around it. In the morning, I went in. The next morning after I left, I went in the chapel and I had pictures, and there was actually beautiful horses, like wild, playing in the field. And it was the sun coming up. It was breathtaking. So there, the church was open, but there were several days where, to be honest, there were no churches open. And I think as a pilgrim, it's nice to go in not only because of the heat and to have some shade, but to have the reflection time, because when you're walking all day, just that quiet reflection time is actually really important. So sometimes I took it more in a park instead. But in Roncesvalles, there was a really old church that was open. I was able to go in the morning.
Can you show us some more?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's in here. So I'm hesitating because it's Google pictures. Like, what else do I have going on here?
And so is this the typical road it looks like a road that you're walking along? Is that the typical path?
No, this was the bigger. So some sections you end up to be on, like a car came up at one point, and bikers, but typically like you're in the woods and you're on narrow paths, or sometimes you're on paths that are all stone, which are actually tricky because like me, I have a knee I have to protect. So when you're going downhill and you're on these rocks, it's like, you know, you're almost sliding down, or you're going up and you're in the middle of the mountains and you're on old, almost like donkey trails or goat trails. Like they're very, very thin.
So I understand some people actually cycle the El Camino. How do they cycle it, or are they not cycling the same route you're taking?
There's detours. So in certain parts of cities or certain areas, they have a different path for the bikes than they have for the pilgrims. So coming into, I'm trying to think of what town, there were so many towns, I can't even remember now. But when I was starting to go up into like the next mountain range, I think before the Meseta, if I remember correctly, there are spots where we were completely on stones in paths that were upweaved through the mountains, and the cyclists were on the roads. So they had to go up around. In fact, I heard some of the cyclists screaming sometimes, and I was like, at one point I called out, "Are you okay?" They're like, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just getting up the mountain." I was like, "All right." They look kind of surprised to see me because I'm up in the trees, right? Yeah, so there's parts they do with us, but there are major parts that they also don't. Like this part they would have been on with us, but usually we kind of segue and detour to the side, and they don't continue to go with us. That was the lunch spot in the Pyrenees overlooking the mountains. It's pretty
Absolutely
incredible.
spectacular views.
Yeah.
And you did this in September. Just keep flipping through as we chat. You did this in September. The weather is what, like it'd be in Ontario or hotter?
I started in August 18th. I started the pilgrimage. So this day was actually, I think it was August 18th, if I remember correctly. So it was warm for sure. Like the first couple of weeks were really warm. I got very, very lucky because the Meseta is the next section, and you're actually in the Meseta over 200 kilometers. And it's typically really hot and dry, hot and humid, and there's not a lot of coverage. So you're out in the sun, but we got so lucky because when we went into the Meseta, we had 4.5 days of cooler weather where it actually went down to 21, 22. And we were so thankful, and it rained one day. So it actually was beautiful. I didn't really have a hard time in the Meseta, whereas lots of people do. Oh.
And tell us a little bit about, what you have to pack. I presume you had hiking boots and rain gear and sun gear and what else?
Yeah, I had my pack, and I had a traveler's pack. I sent the first day, because I was going to Pyrenees, I sent my big pack ahead, and they took it to the next spot, and I had my day pack on with me. But as of day 2, what I did was send anything extra all the way to the end to Santiago de Compostela, and I just had my main pack, and all I had with me was 2 hiking outfits. So I had 2 pairs of running shorts, a pair of running tights that I wore at night that I could sleep in, and I had 1 long sleeve UV shirt, a short like sweat wicking shirt, short sleeves, and then a tank top and like socks, like really good hiker socks and hiking boots. And then I had flip-flops. So that was it. So when it got cold, I finally bought a hoodie because I was freezing at night in the convents. I was literally shaking. I was like, I can't do this. There's 5 nights of just shivering all night. And then I gave up and I bought a hoodie. But, I've got all my posts as I went through because this is Google Photo. But yeah, so you don't have a lot. And the hard part is when it starts to get, if you walk late.
If you walk late, what?
That was the town I was saying I detoured by accident. But if you walk late, you have to wash your clothes, right? Because you only have 2 days of clothes. So I have to put them out on the line, but they don't usually dry. So what you end up doing is putting on the ones that are less wet the next day, right? And then take the ones that are kind of more wet and you hang them up 2 days in a row. So luckily it was warm enough that they dry pretty quickly, because otherwise it wouldn't have been that fun.
And any good advice suggestions? I went to one person's talk about this pilgrimage, and he said, make sure that you break in your hiking boots before you come. The worst thing you can do is start hiking in brand new hiking boots.
That was the detour spot. Yes. Luckily I had started to break in my hiking boots 2 years before when I did the 138 kilometers. And I think it made a big difference. My other, though, most important tip is, what is it called? Body glide. So you can get it at Sport Check, you can get it at any most major sporting stores or Running Room, anything like that. And it's amazing. It's what the Ironman athletes use, like for chafing or rubbing. And I used it on my heels and on my toes every morning. I just rubbed it all over my feet. Well, not a lot. And it made a huge difference, because the first time I had to change my socks halfway through the day because I was so nervous about blisters. And even in day 3, there were people who had the whole like bottom balls of their feet bandaged. They're taking breaks so their feet are out of their shoes. And you just look at them and it's already hard enough doing the hike, let alone to have your entire bottom of your feet bandaged. So I was very, very lucky. I did not get my first blister until I think day 19. And I got them in the same spot. And I knew why, because I had a day where my shins were hurting all day. I thought I was going to die. It was like a 38-kilometer day. I was in tears many, many times. And so I had to walk differently. I was walking a little bit too high on my feet, trying to get through because there were big rocks on the ground. It wasn't flat. And I got blisters. But I knew
so if you walk a little bit strange, you get blisters.
Yeah, pretty much. If you walk strange, you get blisters. Yes. That might actually be the church in Ronsondale or further. I think it was.
Well, it's just a fascinating pilgrimage that you took, and an incredible experience. Now you talk about, crying. If you were crying, why'd you keep going?
Well, I committed to do it, right? I was there to do it. And I knew that getting blisters could be part of the journey and part of the experience. And to be honest, I was grateful I didn't have blisters till day 19. I mean, most people had them well before that. And I think too, there's a big belief, and it's kind of weird, but there's a big belief for some spiritual people, definitely a lot of religious people, the idea of like asceticism, right? Like you're there, you're pushing your body to another level, you're going through the discomfort, and part of that allows you to break through mentally to another place too, and to see what you're capable of. And I think that's a valuable thing to experience personally.
We're chatting tonight with Kathleen Black about her trip through the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage in northern Spain. We're going to take a break and come back more with Kathleen in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Kathleen Black about her trek, her pilgrimage through the Camino de Santiago, a pilgrimage of St. James, supposedly, and it goes all the way from a town in southwestern France through the Pyrenees Mountains and across northern Spain, and ends up at the Atlantic Ocean. Kathleen, tell us a little bit more about your experiences and what you saw along the way, if you could.
I think, it's, I saw along the way so many things. I mean, you're going through from the mountains into areas with big fields with actually sunflowers. I went through so many fields of beautiful sunflowers, which was actually gorgeous. And you're out hiking in the morning when the sun is coming up, and it's really breathtaking. But I think it's also interesting the people you talk to. I talked to one school teacher from France, and he was actually being called back off of his holidays early because he was doing extra lessons for students to catch up with COVID, who had multiple kids at home, and they didn't have enough, laptops or computers. So they were doing lessons on WhatsApp, which was really interesting. But he had talked about a couple months before, he was in Santiago de Compostela for another reason, and he went to the cathedral, and outside he saw these people, weeping and laughing and dancing, and he's like, I couldn't believe it. He's like, I was like, what are these people doing? Like, are they on ecstasy? Are they on some crazy drug? And he said, they had this euphoria around them, and he's like, I saw the end first, and I knew I had to come back and do this. So he kept coming back in 3 or 4 week stints to do parts of the Camino. So you're talking to people, and he ended up to actually have a history degree on Spain. So you're talking to people who all of a sudden are educating you about, the values and the people and the church and the prior dictatorship. And, it's just fascinating conversations with people as you're going through. And later on the Camino, I started to meet with some people who are there, I think, more for spiritual reasons than religious reasons. And I think that's all are very open. There were a lot of people there saying that, they're not sure if they're religious people, but they know they have this need and curiosity towards spirituality, and they believe that all people are connected, and they really wanted to connect with that part of themselves in their lives, which was really beautiful. People were really open about that. And at one point we got into the more medieval towns, which is, you know, a whole other mountain range, but those towns were there before the Camino, whereas a lot of the other towns after were actually created around the Camino journey. So the medieval towns are really special because they're there before, they predate, you know, the thousands of years. When people talk about Santiago taking this beautiful, you know, journey, and you're walking through Spain and there's, you know, monuments and artifacts talking about the pilgrims hospitals and the ancient, you know, hostels, and, you know, some towns would have 8 pilgrims hospitals just in the town. And it was really interesting in the medieval towns that they talked about the Camino actually being a series of 13 energy points, and that people had done that Camino even when you go back to, you know, more like medieval times or more pagan beliefs, and they had done it as a sense of alignment, and that the true 13th spot was actually Finisterre, because again, they believed that was the end of the world. So pilgrims on the Camino carry a shell, and the shell is saying that you're, you know, a pilgrim and you're honoring, you know, Santiago in the way of St. James. But in fact, when they look further back in the history, people used to get the shell at the end and carry it back. So there's still people in Europe who leave their house, do the Camino all the way to Finisterre, and then go all the way back walking to their home. They do the reverse way. So there's now, you know, traditions where people say, leave your shell because you're actually supposed to get it at the end. And that's how they prove that the end of the world existed, right? Because they had found the ocean, which is really, really interesting.
What are the 13 energy points?
They're different physical points. So they believe that it's really kind of an amazing, interesting synchronicity, because a few years additional before, I'd taken my kids on a cruise and we were at the Vatican, and I bought this cross that really appealed to me. And at the time they talked about it being, you know, the Tau cross, and that it was a belief in never losing your faith and never losing your hope. This time of the Camino, I start to notice these pins, and it's the same as the Tau cross. And they're talking about that this cross is the pilgrim's cross, and it's used to represent, again, love and faith and returning to source energy. And which I'm going, wow, that's kind of interesting. But afterwards, we found out it's also the Templars cross. So the Templars were people who, you know, again, kind of had that sacred energy, or it was a little bit before. They ruled the lands when it was, you know, knights and all that fun stuff. And they actually had the medieval towns, and it was a little bit before the religious aspect of it. So these Templars protected areas along the Camino that were physical locations that they believed were important energy spots that you could align to, or you could empower, or it could empower dark energy if you didn't understand it. So there was one place that I guess had symbols of a goose, and that was part of the Templars, showing that it was a special energy source. So they don't know exactly where all 13, only some are preserved in the medieval towns, and then at the lighthouse at the end of Finisterre, where people will bring something from their pilgrimage and they'll burn it. And it's just like on the Camino, people bring a rock, right? I had, I think by the end of my Camino, 10 rocks that represented, you know, wishes or prayers or hope for people who had lost a loved one, or somebody who had an illness, or somebody, you know, who was grieving. I met people who were grieving on the Camino, and you carry that with them because it's a sign of them getting, you know, forgiveness for shame, or purity, or hope for the future, or connection to, you know, another soul. So it's really something. Like, people still do the Camino as a penance. They still believe.
As a penance.
Explain
yes, they penance.
They do it as a penance. So there was somebody who was walking the Camino after their retirement, because they believed that what they did for a career, they needed forgiveness for that they had done really well. They didn't share what it was. Some of the other pilgrims kind of said, well, I asked them if they were a drug dealer or if they were, you know, a pimp of sorts, and they said no. So I think it was a little more serious. But the belief is when you do the full Camino that you're forgiven for all your sins. So some people laughed at me and said, you know, Kathleen, you didn't have to come back. Like 2 years ago, everything you did was forgiven. You didn't need to do it again. Even at 138 kilometers, you got the Compostela, you're good to go. And I laughed and I said, I haven't done anything in the past 2 years that I need forgiveness for, but that's not the reason I'm doing it. But still, it has a history of people actually even being, if they did a crime or things like that, some people were actually, what is it called? I'm forgetting the right word, but they were forced to do the Camino. Like, that was one of their options to overcome what they had done. Yeah.
Show us some more pictures if you could.
See, I'm all in one certain spot at this part. Hope I'm going the right way. See, the
Must
path
have,
over here is more like the hiking path.
right? And lots of livestock along the way.
Lots in certain areas. There was lots of livestock. Yeah.
And a lot
that
of it
was
is
a rest
above,
spot.
a lot of it is above the tree line so that you don't have trees.
No, at one part you felt like you're walking into the clouds, which was really cool because you go up to the highest. I don't know what the elevation is now. Ironically, we all thought this was the highest point on the Camino. And then the guidebook, because you don't really read ahead, you just kind of go, okay, like I have to hike this today. It doesn't really matter. And one of the days I'm going to leave thinking it's an easy day. And like, oh, you're going to hit the highest point on the Camino today in another mountain range. I was like, what? What's going on? So the Pyrenees actually isn't the highest point. I'm forgetting the mountain range. It might have been Mont Gonzo or something like that. But at this point, you're just in so many places. And there's all these monuments just honoring, people who have done the journey or people have passed or people who have like spent their lives trying to preserve the Camino and the way. So it's really, really special. Yeah, this is getting up where we go over.
And when you're walking, you're obviously taking some pictures and some videos. What else are you doing? Just thinking?
Yeah, the first few days were like, the first day was really hard. So I wasn't thinking that much. I was just like trying to get through the day and hiking and sweating a lot. But the other days, yeah, like your head plays songs. I thought it was amazing how many songs my brain knew that I couldn't say out loud, or certain days when you do the marching thing, left, right, left, just to go. Yeah, I didn't talk on the phone a lot. I know some people kind of said they had to call home. They went a little bit stir crazy and they just needed to talk to somebody certain days. But, yeah, there were certain days I told myself I could have a rest day, which meant I can just stop where I want and eat whatever I want. It's like if you get 10 coffees and 10 croissants, you're good. Just get through the days. And other days you have momentum and you kind of feel like you're flying, up the mountains and you just kind of go, right?
When you met other people and were chatting with other people, was that usually during the evenings when you were back in the towns or on the path?
There were a couple of days where I hiked with other people, and earlier on, kind of the French professor, and I'm trying to remember who else. I hiked just small portions. Later on, I met a couple of other women who were hiking on their own, and I hiked 2 days with them. I actually slowed down to stay with them because I wanted to enjoy the time, and had dinner with them and whatnot. But yeah, you meet people at night. Like this year, there wasn't as many people on the path, whereas other years there's more. So I know.
When you ended, you were joined by your boyfriend.
Yes.
Is this something that you think that you should do on your own or with somebody?
I felt I wanted to do, well, it's ironic. My son was going to come with me, which is the only reason. Well, there are 2 reasons I committed to it, because we wanted to do it for awareness and to raise money for Canadian shelters, but also because I thought my son was going to go, which caused me to kind of say, yeah, I have the time right now. Right. So that was one reason. But when he wasn't going to go, for me, it was important to do it alone. But I know other people who went together, but they didn't necessarily hike the whole day together. They'd let each other kind of do their own path, and they'd meet up at the end of the day, or they'd meet up at lunch. But I think it really gives you time to reflect and just kind of see what pops up in your own mind. I think it's a special thing to do it on your own, and you just align with people who are like-minded values out of nowhere. And it's kind of shocking. People will talk about things. You're like, you're talking about that? Like I'm meant to be talking to you right now. And it's just a really special feeling of alignment, I think.
Did you, when you met other people, either on the trail or in the evenings, were they typically hiking on their own or with partners or in groups?
It was a mix. Later on, there were kind of little groups who had formed with a few people. Like some of the people that I kind of kept up with, they were hiking long days. So when the guidebooks were more like 20, 22 kilometers a day, we were doing like 30, 35, 40, right? So we were going a little bit faster. So I'd start to see people at the cafes and things like that. But even then, it was, a mix. There were certain groups that had the same pace, but I didn't see a lot of big groups personally. I more saw people on their own, or even local hikers, right? People will come and do a day hike from one spot on the Camino to the next day, and they'll do it with 4 or 5 people. Or if you have a guide, then you'd be with the group. But that's a very different experience. Like I even sent my bags ahead because I didn't want to have to stop at a certain spot. I didn't want anything about it to be pre-scheduled. If I felt like keep walking, I wanted to keep walking. Even if I got there at 8 p.m., I wanted to have no kind of schedule and structure around it.
And when you're getting to the different towns, are you, you said that a couple of times you had the communal dinners, a couple of times you went out.
Yeah.
Were you having, local delicacies, or what were you eating?
No, at the beginning, well, no, yes and no. I mean, the food was always decent, but you're tired, right? And you're hungry. Like when you pass by, there were I always notice the bread delivery, right? Because there, the trucks still come through the town and they beep, and people line up to go into the bread stores with masks on. And so I'd go in many times and just get a loaf of bread and get some fruit and kind of eat as I went along. That was pretty common. Once we got into Spain, it was a little bit different because they do have local delicacies like their octopus and, different types of sausage. And anytime I was in a town, I'd say what's local or what's really good, and always try whatever they recommended, which was great, right? But honestly, it just depended. Sometimes you just didn't care. You eat bread, you go to sleep. That's it. That's the honest
Did you use these hiking poles the whole way?
Yes, almost the entire time, because they allow you to have a better weight distribution with your pack. And because I was really protective of my knee, they helped me immensely. So when you're going up really steep hills, I could go super fast up because I knew how to use my hiking poles. And even in town, what you find after that many days of hiking, it's the concrete and the sidewalks that are actually really hard on your knees and feet. So I would use the poles with kind of the blocks on the bottom. So even in town, I could kind of even out. I would never recommend doing it without the poles. There's some people who did, and it helped me from falling. Probably 5 times I would have had a big fall if I didn't have the poles. And once I did, I tripped and I was getting something out of my bag. And so the poles were on the side. I was actually trying to get my phone because I wanted to write something that's so dumb. And I tripped, and it was all these boulders. And sure enough, the weight of my pack went forward. So I couldn't really catch myself. And then I landed right on my knee, right on my bad knee. And there's blood everywhere. And I'm just like, come on, right? So I bandaged it up and I just kept going. But if I had to use my poles properly, that probably would not have happened. This is actually the border to Spain.
We're chatting tonight with Kathleen Black about her pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago. We're going to take a break and come back with a little bit of a sort of a conclusion in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting tonight with Kathleen Black. She runs a coaching consulting company called Kathleen Black Coaching Consulting. She coaches people on creating teams in real estate brokerages. And I've done a show with her previously about how important she thinks a team is, which is a little bit ironic because she did this incredible trek, the Camino de Santiago, by herself across northern Spain. So, Kathleen, how did it finish?
How did it finish? Well, I think it finished with, that's Santiago here. So they said, a lot of people said to me, the walk is just, this is an example of the dorms you sleep in, but that the walk is just the beginning, at the end, you have to process it after. And I think, I do believe in teams. Those are some of my Camino friends that I found after. This particular day, we did the equivalent of, I think it was 450 flights of stairs in one day. It's called the Human Stairmaster to get up to O Sobrero. And it was just incredible. And I think, this is an example of one of the princesses who used to live in that area. And in one way you look over, now I'm going to forget the names, but you look over, oh my gosh. One direction looks over to Leon, and that mountain is Leon, which we climbed over, and the other direction looks into Galicia. And Galicia is so special because they still honor a lot of more pagan rituals, and they talk about, anywhere where the witches were burnt and all this stuff, but it's considered this mystical, magical land because they've always had more poverty. So you go into Galicia where you go through and, things are cheaper, but it's also believed to be kind of magical. And you're in these forests and you feel like you're in Robin Hood or something. And I think, how did it end? I think it ended like anything. Like you get further into knowing yourself and kind of, for me, believing in synchronicity and believing in your destiny and that we're all here to be of service in the world. And that's when we can be great with teams. So I know I kind of hiked it on my own, but I think I'm better in a team for it.
What is synchronicity?
To me, synchronicity is when you start to notice, things that are a coincidence until you realize they're not. I think to me, synchronicity is setting your energy at a certain place or being really intentional about how you want to live and then allowing the universe to bring things to you or to not, and really being open to learning and trusting the way of the world. And that's what the Camino is about. It's about, I can set my sights on being of highest service and doing what I believe is my destiny and having courage to show up for it. And the universe is going to send me clues. And I think the more you watch for it, the more it sends you clues. And ironically, Galicia at the end, that's what that area is known for, right? For that magic and that alignment. So I didn't really think about it that way, but that's exactly how it ended, I guess.
And did you end at the ocean?
I did not, because I got into Santiago de Compostela and my partner, as you said, he met me in Portugal, but he actually was supposed to meet me in Santiago de Compostela, and we were going to drive together to Finisterre because I had kept my rocks and my blessings for people to take there, and I had something to burn, and I got dizzy. I actually got dizzy, and they said I was a little bit dehydrated, and that your body, it's just like when you're high performance in work, your body is go, go, go with all this adrenaline. And when you slow down, your body basically goes, guess what? Like, yeah, we're tired. So I ended up to go and meet him, and I took my rocks actually to a church in Lamago, which is the Church of Divine Miraculous Healing. And I left all my prayers there, except for one person who had a special rock, which is shaped like a heart. He lost his wife, unfortunately, on a second case of cancer, and I'm bringing that rock back to him. But, I had a different ending, but I don't think I'm done with the Camino. I think, at least once more, I'll go back and I'll go to Finisterre. I think there's just something still there for me, which is kind of crazy, but I'll do it again.
Stop sharing for a minute if you could, and come back to us. I've always wanted to do this trek. I've dreamt about it. A couple of years ago, I went to a seminar with my best friend of 40 years, and we heard a story by a guy, investment banker, someone that had gone to the same university that we had, who lost his job, and he had always planned to do this pilgrimage. And he said it's the perfect thing to do when something happens in your life. So have it planned, ready to go, so that if something crappy happens or whatever, you can take the time off and go do it and think. And my best friend, who passed away, regrettably in the last couple of months, and I said we were going to do it. So it's something that I feel called to do. And it's one of those coincidences in life that you and I met by chance, and you've gone on this trek, and you've now told us a little bit about it. Were you called to do it? Was it part of your destiny?
I think it was very much part of my destiny to do it. And there's something there for me. And it's just always, you could say it's haunted me or it's called me, one or the other or both, right? Most definitely. And I think everyone I talked to there felt the same. I didn't meet anybody who was there just to go for a walk. That just wasn't the case. Like, everybody felt they were there for a reason, or they were mourning the loss of a loved one, or they just needed to kind of find their way back to themselves, right? Or back to the collective, maybe.
So what did you learn? You said synchronicity and destiny. Is that what you learned, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think I learned, that, yeah, I think it's like anything else, that when you're aligned and you're intentional, that everything great happens in life. You have to be courageous and do the right thing. And sometimes the world tries to pull you in other directions. And for me, the more I'm courageous to do what I feel aligned to do, the better my life gets, and the better and more magical things show up, for sure.
The more magical things show up.
Yeah, I think so. I'm a big believer in energy. I think we're very connected, and the Camino is quite a metaphor for that. Everyone's going in the same direction for the same reasons, right?
Kathleen Black, thank you so much for sharing with us your pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago, the pilgrimage of St. James across northern Spain. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me to share. I appreciate it, Brian. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Well, that's our show for tonight. And you know what? It's inspired me to go get some hiking boots. Maybe we should all go plan a trek. Thanks, Kathleen. Good night, everybody.